And I think sometimes when it comes to love and relationships, there's so many ideals that we then impose and enforce on the relationship. And what I'm learning.
Devon, welcome to Women of Impact.
Thank you, Lisa. Thanks for having me.
I am so honored to have you. And where I want to start is with one extremely powerful quote of yours.
Okay.
We never fully come to terms with a loss that cuts us to our soul. Now, you said that in your book, It Takes a Woman. Mm-hmm. How were women in your life able to help you overcome that cut to your soul?
Yeah, I mean, that cut that I'm referencing is the death of my father. So when I was 9 years old, my father died of a heart attack when he was 36. And that, most of my life, my memories of him, he was an alcoholic. And I'm the middle child of 3 boys. And so a lot of, our upbringing was just trying to navigate, the ups and downs of when he would be around and what state of mind he would be in. And, we just never knew. So at 9 years old, when he died, that death was so traumatic to all of us, me and my brothers and my mom. I mean, the day that he died, my mother picked us up from school and we were supposed to go to the hospital. And then we got the call, she got the call that he had passed. She's hysterical, drives us, to the hospital and picked up one of my aunts along the way. And so I start the book, with that moment of my mother saying, walking us into the morgue at the hospital, at Highland Hospital, Oakland, California. And she says, kiss your father goodbye. And so I talk about, you don't know what cold is until you've, had the cold of the kiss of death. And so that pain and that trauma and that, loss is really what inspired that quote. And so having that wound, I think that, the women in my family, my mother and my grandmother had seven sisters. And so, it really was a lot of, women in our village, so to speak, that really surrounded us. And I think what they saw was, here are 3 young boys who have a void, losing their father has created this void, and we want to help them as much as we can. And I think that desire to not want to see us a statistic, that desire to say, hey, there's, Paulette can't do this on her own. That's my mother's name. Let's come in and help as best we can to just give them the support that they need. And so I think that the women in my family were really galvanized to do that because of the pain that they saw us go through. And they were also in pain too. Losing my father was devastating for everybody.
I mean, yeah, so your mom had 3 boys. So just like that, she becomes a single mother overnight with 3 boys. And to deal with her kids' trauma as well as her own trauma, to have to go through that takes a strong freaking woman.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that you really talk about in your book, and you have your family around you who also talk in the audible about the experience that they go through. And the one thing that you hear time and time again in the audible as you interview your mom and your aunts is tremendous strength.
Yeah.
Tremendous strength. Now, they also show their vulnerability though. Mm-hmm. And as a result, it's not just their internal work they've done, it's the work they've done to actually impact other people yourself.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Instead of calling the book It Takes a Village, I was like, no, it takes a woman to give, the women in my family their flowers, and then also to give all women, their flowers. I think there's just sometimes an expectation that women are going to do a certain thing, and as a result, it isn't always valued. And so for me doing this book, I was like, no, I want to value the impact of women, as a man. I want to say, hey, I wouldn't be the man that I am if it wasn't for the women in my family making the sacrifices that they made. And the interesting thing that you're mentioning, even in the question is like, there is that interesting balance between sacrifice and regret, right? But there's that interesting combination of like, okay, we're going to sacrifice for these kids because there's some things that we feel remorseful for too. Things decisions they made, which they would have done differently in life. Maybe mistakes they made with their own children. And they saw me and my brothers as an opportunity to potentially maybe put a right where they felt like they were wrong. So we got the benefit in a real way of a lot of wisdom, a lot of like, okay, here's what we did wrong. Here's how you don't need to go down the same road. And so I really appreciated that for this book, they were willing to share that. It's not a book just like, oh, here's our triumphs. No, here's our tragedy. Here's the sacrifices, but here's where we're remorseful. And what I love about the book and what I love about those who are hearing it and being impacted by it is that I think that sometimes there's a pressure, to be a strong woman. My mother was a strong woman because of her vulnerability. saying, hey, I got these 3 boys, I'm going to do my best, but I need help. And her not being so ashamed or afraid to admit I need help, then brought in my grandmother's 7 sisters, and that really helped make up the difference. And so the portrait of a strong woman wasn't just one that's stoic,
Right.
it was one that says, I'm vulnerable too.
God, that's so beautiful, because a lot of us, I think, we do, especially when it comes to kids, right? It's like, what type of mother do I want to be? What type of partner? What type of teacher do I want to be to my children? And yet at the same time, the struggles of what we as women are going through are very real too. And so to translate the lessons you're learning for your kids to help get them stronger, and come from a point of using those mistakes, problems, issues as a form of strength is so amazing. And when I say strength, to your point, I don't mean like rah rah, right?
Yeah.
I just mean like, oh, here's where I've gone wrong and I'm sorry, or this is how I can do better.
Absolutely.
And so one thing that I really want to touch on that you said in losing your father, you were overlooked, unseen, and undervalued. Now, I've heard that your mum felt really bad about the unseen part.
Yeah.
So how do you navigate that? How did you navigate it with your mum back then? Did you tell her you felt unseen? And then talk about now, because so many of us women hold on to things. Hold on to things that we may have done wrong, as like, this is who I am, maybe I'm a failure. And for your mum to hear you speak out loud that you were unseen must have been like a stab in the heart.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, it was. I mean, there's a chapter in the book called If You Don't Know Me by Now. And so in that chapter, it was a moment when growing up where, I had this, I don't remember exactly what led up to the moment, but my mom and I were discussing something and I got mad and I just yelled out, you don't know anything about me. And her response to that was, well, at least I kept you. So at the time, I didn't really know what that meant. And I remember asking one of my aunts, I was like, well, what does that mean? And they were telling me, well, your mother was raised with us for, about the 10, 11 years of her life. And as a result, even though she wasn't adopted, she still bear the emotion of someone who feel when they are adopted, meaning not feeling wanted and feeling abandoned. And so that idea of like her feeling abandoned, one of her successes or goals at the time was, well, when I have my children, they're always going to be with me. No one else is going to raise my children. No one else is going to, my children's not going to live in anyone else's house but my house. And so for her, that was success. So for her, she's like, I've made it. My husband has passed away. My kids are, with me. I'm providing for them. They're doing well in school. I'm putting food on the table, clothes on their back. I'm doing it. So for her, success.
Yeah.
For me as a kid, I was like, no, this is not enough, because I didn't feel like I was being seen in the process, that I was being valued. So in that moment when I yelled that, it was just an honest moment. But the interesting thing about doing this book with Audible, my mom and I never discussed it until we did the book. So I brought it up. I said, do you remember this? And to my surprise, not only did she remember it, she said that it haunted her from that day to this. And so doing this book and talking about it really was an opportunity for us to, find some healing, because as a kid, I think that my needs were beyond, just, yes, of course, I'm grateful we have food on the table, clothes in the back. Of course, like none of that goes without saying. Yet at that time, I was more interested in like a personal connection, like getting to know who I am, what I'm thinking, what I'm about, what I want, who I am as this, young kid growing up, and so as a result, I didn't always feel seen by her. And then over the years, as I've grown up, I was able to say, okay, mom did the best she could with what she had. So I can't hold her to a standard of what could have been or what I want. No, this is what it was. And look what she did with it, right? This is what she had in the kitchen, and look what she made. She did a pretty good job. So as I got older, I gained a greater appreciation. And that also helped me to alleviate, and forgive and say, well, mom did the best she could. And look at this. She brought in all this help too. So, when you look at all of the different types of advice and wisdom and support that me and my brothers got, we got more than most. And so as I've gotten older, I've had more appreciation, and me and my mom have been able to kind of, heal those wounds. And I do think that, as I think that she felt guilty when she heard me say that. I think she felt very, very guilty. Like, wow, I'm doing the best I can, but I didn't realize there were some things here that I wasn't really addressing. And I would say to any mother, the job is not to be everything. It's not, because you can't. It's a losing job to try to be everything to your children. You just can't do it. So do the best that you can and trust that the differences will get made up the way they need to,
Oh, Devon, there were so many things that you said there that were so powerful. First of all, the guilt. Oh my God. It's something that a lot of us women have all the time, even when we have the best of intentions.
Sure.
And, hearing your mom, like, she put you first, and like she said, like, she felt abandoned, and she told herself, I'm never going to do that to my kids. So here she is feeling freaking pride and amazement that she was able to do it with all the hard circumstances that she grew up in. And then by one comment that you make,
Right.
it stripped her of it.
Right.
Now, obviously you didn't mean it
No,
from
of
the
course
extent,
not.
because you didn't have the same perspective on what that meant. I'm a true believer that in order to have a successful relationship in the future, or to have a great relationship with yourself, to look at healing these traumas that you've had as a child that maybe you're holding on to. I've done too many episodes with therapists to not think about that.
Yeah, of course.
So when I start to think about how you were felt unseen back then, and feeling unseen is the number one reason why people get divorced. And so now I'm thinking, if you're in a relationship and you feel unseen, and now you're someone who maybe has a trauma or a trigger
Around that.
Right.
It's like, woo.
Yes. So how have you, so there's so many questions, how have you navigated feeling unseen as a child and not bringing that into your future self or your person that you are now as a trigger? And then secondly, how as women did your mum actually heal from feeling like she wasn't a perfect mother? Because while a lot of my audience may not be mothers, but it's like the perfect partner, the perfect, woman that you want to be. Like, when we face those moments of, oh, I didn't realize I was actually failing. I thought I had a certain perspective of my life. And now, how on earth do I move forward from this, having now maybe a destroyed identity?
Yeah.
So how did your mom heal from that?
Yeah. I'll hit that part, and then I'll come back to the first part of the question. I think it's been a process for her, and to be honest, she might say that she's not completely healed. Just in doing the book, there was still so much pain there, and there was still so much grief. And I think even with that, though, she still feels like a confidence of, I did the best that I can, and that was more than enough. I mean, when you look at me and my brothers, we're all, relatively successful, and trying to make a positive contribution to our community and culture, and and pretty upstanding citizens, so to speak. And so for her, from our vantage point, she did an amazing job. So I think some of it is letting herself off the hook too, to say, hey, perfection is it's not a reality, right? There's nothing nothing or no one that is perfect. And that really, to me, should never be what we aspire to, as a perfectionist in recovery, right? It's like, no. Let me search for truth. Let me search for progress. I'd rather have progress than perfection, because progress means like, okay, I'm always getting better and I'm working. Perfection is this, mythological idea or ideal that what is your definition of perfection, mine is different, right? So then we're trying to both achieve this, and it just drives us crazy, versus saying, okay, am I better yesterday than I was today? And I think that for my mother, as she's seen us, grow into our lives and careers and successes, I think that has given her more peace, that she did do a great job. And, we call her and talk to her all the time and make sure she feels loved. And I think that also helps, but I know that she has her own internal struggles at times, and I think that comes part and parcel, with the journey. And then on the first part of it, being a kid that did not feel, seen, part of the work that I had to do was to, because a lot of times at the time, my remedy for that was achievement. So it's like, okay, cool, I don't feel seen. Well, how am I going to get seen? Well, let me do some things that will, I mean, it wasn't that calculated, but that was the subconscious,
Right.
tape that was kind of driving my behavior. So let me, I'm on the honor roll, and I'm being a good student, and I'm playing, basketball, and I'm, working at church and doing all that's expected of
high
me.
achiever.
The high achiever,
Yeah.
the overachiever. Oh, good job, Devon. Pat me on the back, all of that. So it was like, okay, let me achieve as a way to heal the wound of not being unseen. Now, that certainly, that works to a point, right? But then the achievements then become like any sort of substance, mind-altering substance that you may take to numb, right? Whatever we're feeling, right? So it's like, okay, I was feeling a pain of not being seen. I need the high of an achievement. It works for a moment, but then the achievement goes away. The pain's still there. So I got to go push for another achievement and another achievement. And so what I've had to learn is that I first have to see myself, right? And that seeing of self is like appreciating who I am, where I am, and I'm okay, right? So connecting that idea, I'm okay, to the trauma, right? So we go back to the trauma of like being this kid, and when my father was around, I didn't know if I was going to be okay, just because we just never knew what state of mind he was going to be in when he came home. Sometimes he wouldn't be around, sometimes he would be around. And so this idea of like, are we going to be okay, was really like the primary driver of our stability at the time. And so there were a lot of times, when I didn't feel like I was going to be all right, but I didn't know how to deal with that. So I just dealt with it by suppressing and not, acknowledging and, achieving and all that. So you take that idea of like, I just want to be okay. I just want to be okay. How do I get okay? I achieve. Okay, everybody pass me on the back. Great. Okay, so what do you do then when you realize that that pain that you're trying to achieve yourself out of to be okay is still there? So I had to learn to see myself and say, okay, Devon, you can achieve the greatest heights in this world. It's not going to feel the pain. It's not. So at a certain point, you got to decide, who are you, and do you appreciate who you are? Do you see you? Because if you're asking people to see something that you're not seeing, it sounds crazy, right? Oh, I want you to see me. Well, do you see yourself?
Yeah.
And when I say see yourself, it means, I'm not about being selfish, but I've learned the value of self-prioritizing. These cups are relatively full, right? So if you wanted more in your cup and I have nothing in my cup, I can't help you, right? So a lot of times we think, oh, it's selfish. No, it's actually, when I self-prioritize, I can better help you, because if I fill this cup, I can then fill your cup. And so I had to learn that. And it's something I'm still learning, like, okay, I have to see myself. Anything I'm asking anyone else to do, are you first doing it for yourself? And if you are doing it for yourself, then maybe that'll lessen the desire or the demand that somebody else do something for you in that regard. So it's been a process, but doing this book was very healing for me, to be able to acknowledge those wounds of the past, not run from them, and still, process and try to heal through them.
Wow, that's so powerful. And as you were talking, I was wondering, like, have you partly learned to not put yourself first or not see yourself because so many women in your family did that, where they were putting other people first, and like, so they were putting like you kids first, or they were putting...
No, I don't think that was it. I just don't think I felt, this is an interesting nuance, right? I felt love, but I didn't feel like I was valuable. So yes, so it's weird. It's like I felt the love and I felt like the support. So I don't put that at their doorstep, but just growing up, as this middle child, I didn't necessarily feel valued. So I think that it was always, it's always been a search for value, a search for, like appreciation, a search for like, do I matter? And I think that has been what was driving me then and what was the issue then, but it didn't have anything to do with them, putting others first.
Right.
It just had to do with how I was feeling about myself.
Because sometimes I actually get that, but sometimes it's that, you know, people are sacrificing to give to someone else, and yet at the same time you're maybe passing on that message that, oh, you should also be doing that, not putting yourself first. And so many things that we talk about now, at least for me, is exactly what you said about how can you fill your cup up first so that you can help somebody else.
Right.
And so being Greek Orthodox, I grew up in a family where all the women never put themselves first. Like, it was always for the greater good of the family, for the greater good of their husband, for the greater good of their kids. And so I just saw growing up so many women in my family sacrificed. And I do believe that's where I learned it from. And I don't blame my family, right? It's like they were doing the best they could. But there is this moment of beauty that I see in myself, in recognizing that if I take care of myself first, I'm not just taking care of myself first, I'm pushing the notion and encouraging other people to do the same. Because if I think that I've learned that putting myself first is selfish through my parents, if I echo that same thing, I don't have children, but in echoing that same thing around, you know, in the show, to my friends, that's also going to have an impact. So I kind of like the added pressure that I now have to make sure I talk about taking care of myself, so that message is now passed on.
Absolutely. It's critical, because so often, you know, and I think that, you know, my mother and my aunts and my grandmother do come from an era of that sacrifice, you know, and it's about others, and it's about, you know, whatever you need is not about you. It's about, you know, who you're caring for, or about, you know, family, or about, you know, others. And so I think that I understand the value of it, you know, but also one of the reasons why I wanted to do this book is so that those sacrifices were not in vain. Right? Like the idea that, you know, these women on some level would give up a portion of their life so that me and my brothers could have life. Then I do this book to say, I know I need to give life back to you. Like, I want you to know the investment you made was good. Right? So, because so often I think that, you know, as men, you know, we do tend to be selfish when it comes to what women offer us and give us. And we do tend to undervalue and take for granted, you know, what women give us. And so for me doing this book, it was like a way to say, no, I'm appreciative. And I want the world to know, you know, I want this to forever be memorialized. And I could have done the book just with my own voice, but I was like, no, I want my mother's voice, and I want my great aunt's voice, the 5 that are still alive. I want all their voices here so that they will be remembered for you know, long after we're gone. This will be eternal, that people can hear their wisdom and glean from them. And I wanted to do that as a way to say thank you, you know, as a way to say,
what up, homie? I got something free and new to share with you right now. How often are you visited by that negative voice in your head telling you that you're not smart enough, that you're not good enough, experienced enough, not fill in the blank? One of the most powerful things you can learn to do in life is to turn that negative voice into your bestie. And I want to teach you how to do that and so much more in my 4 steps to becoming confident workshop. And guys, the most amazing thing is you can actually register for completely free for this workshop. So click the link on your screen and I'll see you on the inside.
I see you and I'm grateful for what you have done. And I do hope that those that listen to it will still take the value of like, okay, yes, sacrifice is good. Yet, I need to first make sure that I am taking care of me. Because if I take care of me, then my sacrifice is that much more successful and can be that much more meaningful, because it's coming from a place of real wellness and real wholeness that sometimes I think we forsake. If we're, you know, I'm chasing success, or I'm chasing what I think is going to make me happy, or I'm finding my value in the sacrifice and finding my value in being there for others. Okay, that's fine. But when they go, where are you? Where are we? So I think that my hope is that this experience that that we share in this book, and that I've been through, and what my mom and my great aunts have been through, that it's about, yes, you should sacrifice. Certainly, there's nothing wrong with that. Yet, please don't sacrifice to the detriment of who you are. And I think that is also one of the things that I learned from them. And I talk about this in the book. There's a chapter in the book called For the Love of Money. And I talk about, you know, one of the things in my family that I learned not to do was how to deal with money. Because I saw so many mistakes, but the mistakes came from this idea of sometimes over-sacrificing. right? Okay, well, you have money in the family and I may have, made some poor decisions with the resources I have. So I'm going to ask you to supplement and subsidize some decisions that I maybe could have made differently. And so then that becomes a repetitive cycle where no one's able to really build the wealth that's possible because each then just take from one another. And so that to me comes from a belief system of like, oh, okay, there's always going to be somebody to help fix and cover the mistakes potentially and clean up the spilled milk. And what I learned is accountability and responsibility. That if someone's there to help, wonderful. But I don't want to live in a way as if I'm counting on that help, right? I don't want to live in a way that like, if someone doesn't help me, then I'm not going to become who I need to be. So I love this idea in the book about sacrifice, but I really hope that the listener will take away that, yes, you should sacrifice, but be careful of sacrificing to your detriment, if that makes sense.
Oh, 1,000%. And I think that is such actually a beautiful way of putting it, because I do want to sacrifice. Like, I feel good about sacrificing for the greater good of my husband, for the greater, like, I feel good about it. But there is that line, and I didn't realize there was that line. And so to your point is like, but up until the detriment of you. And so for me, I think that if any woman out there is, looking to sacrifice for their child or a partner or anything, I think identifying where that line is, where, okay, I'm sacrificing now, and actually right now it's doing me a disservice. And if it's doing me a disservice, then to your point, I'm not going to be able to be strong for everybody else. So would you advise actually to then put down where that detriment line is?
Yeah, I think part of that comes down to boundaries. And also was reading this book called The Courage to be Disliked. It's a great book. If you haven't read it, you got to read it.
No, but it sounds like my type of jam.
Man, it's deep, it's deep, but it's all about this philosophy. But one of the main tenets of this book is called the separation of tasks. So, I do what I need to do. That's my task. Your response to it is your task. Who you become in life is your task. Who I become in my life is my task. And a lot of times those lines of whose task it is gets blurred because we're trying to do everybody else's task for them. It's like, oh, I'm trying to do your homework for you, or I'm trying to make sure you eat, or I'm trying to make sure, and again, obviously if you're a child, I'm not talking about that, but I'm talking about adult to adult. Sure. I'm trying to make sure, that you're going to the gym and that you're like, think about how much time and energy is wasted of people trying to get other people to do things. That's their task, right? Yes. It's like, if you go to the gym, listen, I may love you, but it's up to you to go to the gym. It's up to you to prioritize your health, because no matter how much I prioritize your health, if you don't prioritize your health, there's not much we can do. So learning this idea of the separation of tasks and what is my task. And once I know whose task is whose, I can be supportive of you accomplishing your task, but I don't over-index and over-sacrifice to try to do a task that only you should be doing for yourself.
Ooh, is there a way of you letting go? Because that's the problem, right? Is that
Absolutely. But the letting go is, I love you enough, right, to be supportive of you. It could be a friend, family member. It could be your spouse. It could be whomever your close relationship may be. I love you enough to offer whatever advice or help or support. Yet, if I step in and do it for you, then I'm actually not loving you. Right? Because if I love you, I'm going to allow you to live this thing called life and be there with you, but I can't live your life for you. Right? So yes, there is that in that, and it's a nuance, and it's like, okay, because what I find is that if we are over-indexing or over-sacrificing because we're trying to get somebody else to do something, or we're trying to do something for someone else, that means there are tasks in our own life that we're not attending to.
That's so true.
It's like there's stuff that we're not doing, stuff that we don't want to deal with. Oh, I don't, it's too hard for me to really get down on the inside of why I don't feel good. Okay, let me go help someone else. Let me go meddle in someone else. Let me go, no, seriously, let me go make myself feel important, that I serve this need to whomever the person may be, because maybe I'm not yet taking care of the task of who am I? Where am I going? What are my needs? And again, I am not saying we should not sacrifice. I'm not saying we should I'm not saying we should be selfish. I'm not saying that at all. Yet, I feel like there is a lot of codependency in a lot of our family ships, friendships, relationships, because we have not separated tasks. and we haven't identified, okay, what's my task and what's your task. And when we both commit to doing those tasks, then we can have a great friendship, great familyship, great relationship, because we both are taking accountability and we bring that shared accountability to each other. And that, to me, no matter what the dynamic is when a relationship, familyship, or friendship can go to the next level.
Oh my God, I love that so much. And as you were talking, I was thinking, oh, you would really have to address identity. Like, what identity do you currently have right now? Because in what you're saying, especially with, like for me, I pride myself. I've been married for 20 years. I just celebrated my 20-year wedding anniversary. Thank you.
That's awesome.
And I pride myself on being a good wife. I love how it makes me feel. I also pride myself on being a badass businesswoman.
I love that.
But I have to identify what being a good wife means to me.
Yes.
Because I worried that as I transitioned into business, or as a stay-at-home supportive wife for my husband for 8 years, and then I transitioned into business and helped him build Quest Nutrition and now Impact Theory. And as I was transitioning, I felt guilty about like, oh, well, am I not going to be a good wife anymore, right? You take on that emotion, the pressure, like you said about your mum with the guilt. And so I was taking that with me, but also I was like, okay, if I go into this area, I'm going to have to let go of a lot of the tasks that I've been doing for my husband. And that started to challenge my identity, because I started to say, but then you're not a good wife, Lisa. And now I really freaking struggled with the internal battle between feeling like a good wife and wanting to be a badass entrepreneur. And so I was just beating myself up. And I, of course, like many women, you try and do everything, which ends up meaning that you're not doing anything great. And so I'm trying to do everything, and I was just beating myself up all the time with the guilt and the frustration that I wasn't a good wife. And at that moment is when I paused and I was like, well, hang on a minute. What does a good wife look like to me? Instead of trying to be like, oh, but so-and-so says is a good wife, and so-and-so, I have to do this and I have to do that. And it's the same with parents that I hear, where people are like, you know, the pressure of being, you know, making fresh baked cookies for the class at home. And it's like, you know, but really, what does a good mother look like to you? And I think that becomes a great stepping stone for people, as you were saying about that transition of going from being there for somebody else, but also making sure that you're there for them yourself. The identity piece is hard, especially I think for women. Again, I don't want to like see that it's not difficult for men, but for women, I get it, and I've been there. And so understanding and hearing what you're saying is so beautiful, but it's really freaking tough. And I found that the identity piece of like saying, well, what does this mean? So for me, it was, well, what actually does a good wife look like? And I was like, oh, it doesn't mean that I have to cook for him and clean for him every day. A good wife to me means when my husband needs me and he says, hey, I need you, that I am the kind of person that is willing to drop anything to be there for my husband. And vice versa. It has to go both ways. But then I started to realize this is what I identify as being a good wife. And now, because I've actually sat down and identified what it means to me, I now can actually show up in the world and not have to cook and clean and feel the pressure or the guilt.
Right, because I mean, what you're hitting on is so good, and it's so hard, right? Like getting into who we are, and knowing that, and standing in it, and having the confidence of that, is one of the hardest journeys in life. I mean, you know, it's like, you know, I mean, we talked, you know, a little bit before about superheroes and, you know, all that. Why is it that, you know, superhero genre is like the biggest thing in movies? You know, billions and billions of dollars. Because there's an escapist idea of like, oh, wow, we get a chance to explore what it's like for someone to discover their identity, because a lot of times we struggle in ours. And so this idea of identity, and where I have found, you know, okay.
Ladies, I know sometimes you worry that you're not good enough. Trust me, nobody knows that better than me. I spent almost a freaking decade having my soul sucked out of my body, doing something that I didn't love. Finally, even though I was scared to freaking death, I decided I was going to go for it. And I've ended up building the life of my dreams, a life I couldn't have imagined, because I realized that radical confidence is being afraid and doing it anyway. I wrote this book for you with 10 no BS lessons that you need to go from feeling stuck and frustrated to doing anything that you set your mind to.
Going back to the themes in the book, okay, what's healthy and what's unhealthy? In my opinion, if I find my identity in service to someone else, that to me is like the equivalent of building a house on sand. it's going to go. Because that person, what happens if that person leaves? What happens if that person says, I no longer need your help? What happens if that person says, great, got your help, I'm gonna go on to someone else, or we're no longer gonna be friends, or, as a family, oh, I got the money I need from you and I'm good. Then your identity goes along with the relationship or the friendship or the familyship. So the real key to identity is finding it right here. Who am I? Not who am I in relation to someone. Who am I? Okay, so now once I can get clear of who I am, then from that strength of identity, I then can offer these services. But I'm not offering these services to then find who I am. I'm offering this because I know who I am. And I do feel like when you talk about, in a relationship, in a marriage, that idea of like, okay, well, I was finding my value in this way of service to my husband, but your husband was like, okay, that's cool. And I love that. But what I need is more emotional. What I need is like, oh, like you say, hey, whenever I need something, I'm gonna drop, great. I'm gonna drop what I need. But it's like, okay, we could find someone who can clean the house. We can find someone, who can do the food. Like, no, it's not about that, right? And you having the courage to say, I am also a badass businesswoman. So, and I've got to lean into that identity. And I say courage is because you could have said, no. My identity as being the support for my husband is so strong that I'm afraid of creating the waves necessary to explore the badass businesswoman identity, right? That someone would have said, no, I'm not going to do that.
It took me 8 years. That's why I was a stay-at-home wife for 8 years, because I didn't have the courage to tell him that I wasn't happy, because I thought I was selfish if I said that I didn't want to take care of him. Wow.
Yet the pain of 8 years, you had to say, hey, wait, if I don't self-prioritize and I don't find my true identity, then I'm not going to be of any service to you. Because at the end of the day, that false idea of like, oh, I'm finding my identity in the sacrifice. It's like, no, you got to find your identity independent of it.
I lost my identity in the sacrifice.
Exactly. It's like you lose yourself in like, who I'm trying to be everything to this person or for this person. And then you realize, in many instances, you're not being enough for yourself. So then once you say, hey, I'm a badass businesswoman and I'm leaning into that and I'm building that identity, it was like, oh, now I'm alive. Yeah. Now as a wife, I'm sure I have even more to give you. I have even more to offer. Why? Because I'm making sure that my mask is on. I'm making sure that I'm stepping into my identity. Yeah. And when I feel free to be that badass businesswoman and still be the wife that I want to be, oh my goodness. Then life goes to another level. Right? It's not about like, oh, dinner wasn't on the table. Okay, who cares about that? You know what I mean? Like, no, we're doing things and we're doing life in a different way because both feel completely free to be who they are and then bring that to one another.
God, how are you so in touch with your emotions, the way you think? And the reason why I asked that is because so I had, is your grandfather that says that called you tissue paper?
Pops.
And so, if you don't mind actually explaining that story, because I always think about these pivotal moments in people's lives, right? Where the pressure can actually push them into listening to something that may not be beneficial for them. So if you don't mind sharing the story, and then we'll kind of go deep down into your pops.
My grandmother, like I mentioned earlier, for the first like 11 years of my mother's life, she was just doing her thing. And so my mother was raised with my great grandmother and my great aunts. And so when my grandmother married Pops, who was the only grandfather that I knew on my mother's side, when my grandmother married Pops, then Pops was like saying to my grandmother, hey, let's bring Paulette back into the house because he had 2 sons. So that was the first time that my mother lived with her mother, and then now her new stepfather and her 2 stepbrothers. And so growing up, Pops was the grandfather that I knew, and Pops was great in that he taught us how to camp, he taught us how to fish, taught us how to ride bikes, taught us how to clean fish. Like he was definitely kind of like the traditional, what you would call man's man. Right. So growing up, we did spend time with him, but we didn't nearly spend as much time with him as we spent with my great aunts and my grandmother. We were always hanging out with them. So in the book, there was this, idea that I talk about where he would call me and my brothers tissue paper. Now, my grandfather was from College Station, Texas, so he that kind of saying comes from there, and he would say, you're just, y'all are tissue paper. And what he was saying is, you're hanging around these women all the time, you're becoming soft, you're becoming too soft, and you need to stop hanging around all these women all the time, and what he was also saying is like, I'm trying to make you a man, I'm trying to make you tough. And for me and my brothers, we never took that personally. We laughed because we were like, listen, Pops, you can say all that, but we know what we're getting from hanging with them, and they're fun, and they take us, seriously, and we matter, and we go hang out, and we watch movies together, and we go to church, and we have a good thing and a good time with them. So you can call us tissue paper all you want, okay? But we don't want to become sandpaper either. So we'll keep hanging with them the way we're doing it because it worked for us. But I wanted to mention that because sometimes I think there's this idea that, oh, wait, as young men, you can't grow into being a strong young man if you are surrounded by women. And I wanted, the undercurrent of wanting to do the book is to say, well, that's not true. That's not true. Because if that's true, then a whole generation of young men are doomed because they're being raised predominantly by women. And I don't believe that. I do not believe that. And I believe that me and my brothers are the men that we are because we had the exposure that we had. And so even enduring the ridicule of my grandfather, it's like, okay, that's fine. Be that as it may, we are enjoying the time that we're spending with the women in our family. And we don't want to change that,
That's so powerful because I've just seen so many people that do, so like the young boys go to their fathers and their grandfathers, and obviously your dad passing. And then when I heard the story and then, the fact that he said that to you, I partly expected you to then say, and like it really broke my heart and I was torn and I didn't know what I was going to do. And you were like, oh, we just laughed. And I was like, I didn't know whether that was like out of strength or out of the power of the women in your family, or everything that you just broke down. They gave you happiness, they gave you joy. And so you were like, well, why would I turn away from this?
Yeah, well, I think also it just kind of goes back to that idea of a separation of tasks, right? Just, okay, Pops, that's your point of view. That's not my truth or our truth. So we're not going to feel the pain of what you're saying because it doesn't resonate. It's like, oh, yeah, no, that's not true. Move on. Like it doesn't even, it's sometimes a lot of things that when they hurt us, it's because there's a seed of truth in it. So our reaction, is really very, very revelatory. How we react to certain things is a great indicator of what's going on in here. And so for us, we weren't self-conscious about the time we spent. So we weren't going to allow him to make us self-conscious. Now, maybe if we were already a little self-conscious and he said that, we would have been like, oh, we don't want to be tissue paper. So we're going to go to the extreme to prove our, young boyhood, so to speak. But we weren't self-conscious about it. We had no wound relative to the time we were spending with them. So when he said it, it was very easy to let it just roll off our back. I was like, all right, whatever. Well, that's your point of view, man. We love you. We're going to still hang with you too. Yeah. But I think a lot of times in life, there is this temptation to allow statements like that from others to really then, become a part of our internal dialogue. So think about it. I mean, if we may have been in a different state emotionally, what if that idea of, oh, I don't want to be tissue paper got into my internal dialogue and then started to inform my choices as a man? Well, I don't want somebody to think that I'm soft, and I don't want somebody to think that, that I'm going to do things, or I'm going to, be a certain type of dude because I don't want nobody to think that I'm soft, so to speak.
Right.
I'm thankful that we had a strong enough foundation where that didn't become a part of the internal dialogue. And you mentioned something earlier about, just how can I be so self-aware? A lot of it just comes from pain. It's like, okay, when I go back and look at all the pain that I've had to endure in my life, it's like, oh, okay, all right, this pain is here to teach me if I let it. And this pain is here to help me understand who I am and who I'm not and what I need and what I don't and all of that. So a lot of it comes from just like, a lot of days just feeling like, oh God, who am I? Where am I going? What, God, where are you? That those moments for me are moments that I really lean into to understand more of who I am, what this is about, and then try to offer that compassion to others because, again, I talked about earlier, I'm a perfectionist in reform, right? Like, I thought that was the path. I want to get through life perfectly. And that didn't work. So I was like, all right, I'd rather get through it truthfully. Let me get through it truthfully, right? And it's not going to be perfect, and that's okay. As long as it's true, I can live with that. And being enough in touch with that pain that I've had to experience really has been a great teacher on keeping me on the path of what's true.
What's the driving force then? Is it the improvement? So no matter what I have to go through, because to identify your pain is so hard. For you to sit there and it's beautiful, but so hard for people to go back, identify the pain, take that on them.
Yeah. Well, a lot of times I think that subconsciously we don't know we're in pain, or consciously we don't know subconsciously we're in pain. So we're trying to go about life doing the things that we think are going to produce happiness, joy, contentment. And then we go and do those things, and a lot of times they don't. So it's like, wait a minute, no. If I have this, and this, I'm supposed to feel this way. That's what's in the movies. That's what's in TV shows. That's what's in all the books I read growing up. But I did all this and it didn't work. So it's like, okay, instead of overriding the system, which I've done before, oh no, let me just go get more. It's like, no, stopping for a moment. When I was a young kid, it was actually not that long after my father died. I was playing hide and go seek at my friend's house, and I was gonna go be the one that was gonna find everyone. And then after we counted 10, I went to go run to find my friends, and I ran. Next thing you know, like I stopped and I felt like, oh man, I just ran into something. And I said, oh, I'm not gonna worry about it. And I just started to, try to walk again, and I realized I couldn't. It hurt really bad. And I looked down at my knee, and my knee was cut open.
Oh God.
Yes, I ran past a flower bed, and there was a sharp piece of wood, and it just cut my knee wide open. And literally, I'm looking down, and there's blood coming out. And so I had to yell for help, and they came, and they got me, rushed me to the hospital. I was in the hospital for a couple of days. But my point is this. The first instinct was to brush it off. Oh, whatever, I'm in pain, who cares? No, I'm just gonna push through it. But I had to look and say, no, this is a pain that's causing me to stop. What's going on? Oh, shoot, I'm cut. I'm hurt. Oh, wow, I'm hurt. So it requires that courage to say, I'm not okay. I'm hurting right now. I'm hurting. And part of the question, it is hard to do, but here's the part that's easy. It's a tip that my acting coach is teaching me. Ask yourself repeatedly, how do I feel? 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 Oh, right. I'm not happy. Okay, well, why? How do I feel? Why do I feel that way? And the more we just keep asking, the more that what's in the subconscious becomes conscious. And so for me, again, going back to the pain of losing my father and, being a child and like, where am I going to go and who am I? That pain has been something that as I've gotten older and I've run right into, because I tried to achieve my way and, become, this persona of all this stuff, but that doesn't stop the pain. So for me, I had to just come to a place where I said, okay, this pain is still here. What is it trying to tell me? And let me do the work of trying to resolve it and heal it so that I can grow from it instead of allowing this pain to keep me in a holding pattern of behavior that never allows me to grow and never allows me to truly find contentment.
And do you think addressing all of that pain has helped in every aspect of your life?
For sure. I mean, even doing this book, and being so transparent about where I am and what I'm going through, it's helped every aspect, because what it does, I mean, it's like we're, in similar fields in terms of people looking to us for inspiration and guidance. And so there's a temptation to present and to perform. And so bringing that performance of, oh, I got it, and I got all the answers, and I know, and let me show you, and, let me look a certain way and do all this stuff to convince you that I got it, right? Well, for me, what this journey that I've been on, this journey of truth has done for me is it's helped me put all that to the side. So in every area of my life, I'm just showing up as Devon. Versus like, oh, I need to be Devon, the motivator today, or Devon the influencer, or Devon the, spiritual teacher, or Devon the producer. Like, no, I'm just Devon Franklin, and I feel comfortable, and I'm getting more comfortable with just showing up as myself And of course, I have different skill sets and I'm going to do different things, yet I don't feel the pressure of having to be a certain thing to a certain person because of doing that work and finding the healing and that helping me, almost be liberated in every other area, of my life to not feel that I have to be this certain thing. Or like, this is what they're expecting of me, It's like growing up. I mean, even these tattoos, this is all relatively new. This is like the past year because, for years I wanted to do it, but, I was raised in the church and I was afraid of how people would think of me.
Your tattoos, for people that are listening, yeah.
Yeah, this is within the past year. I was just like, wait, who am I living for? Am I living for me? Am I living for God? Or am I living for everybody else and everyone else's perception of me? So I allowed others' perception to be my prison. Others' perceptions of me to be my prison.
Oh.
And I was like, I'm getting out of this. I am getting out of this. You can think what you want to think. I'm going to do what feels right to me and what feels true. And if that works for you, great. If that doesn't, that's actually not my business or my problem. So being able to step into that truth and being able to express that truth is really one of the byproducts of the healing. And so, yes, it does show up in every area of my life.
Other people's perceptions of me was my prison. God damn. Like, you literally took the wind out of my sails as you said that. That was freaking strong. Oh my, so how does that take place? If you don't mind, I'd love to talk about relationships, because that was actually one thing that you speak about in your book, of how, like, you actually even say, I was a little hesitant on whether I should talk about this or not.
That's right.
But then you do.
Yeah.
So I'd love to talk about that vulnerability and
Sure.
that you showing up as Devon, right?
Yeah. Well, part of the vulnerability, because I have a whole chapter in there about love, relationships, and marriage. And when I was going through the book, when I was doing the book, I was going through a divorce. And so I was very, I was hesitant, like, should I put this chapter in the book? But then I was like, well, this is still, the women in my family taught us a lot about marriage and love and relationships. So if I don't put it in the book, I'm not being truthful to what they poured into us. And so I was just very candid and acknowledged, in that chapter of my own trepidation and going through the divorce, but still feeling like this chapter would be a benefit to the listener. And so that to me was very cathartic, because it was like facing the fear of the shame of divorce, right? And saying, okay, instead of wearing the shame, let me find the strength in it. And just by acknowledging it, yeah, you know what? Hey, here's where I am. Here's what I'm going through. And here are still the lessons that I learned about love and relationships that I still believe in. And so being able to include that in the book, to me, made the book feel more, not only just truthful, but more whole and more three-dimensional. Because those that follow me and know what I'm going through, I think it would have been awkward
for you not to mention it.
For me to not mention it. Awkward in a way, not from me feeling the pressure to be something to them, but it revealing that I'm actually not on a truthful journey.
So
right?
true.
Right? Because if I keep it out and I don't acknowledge it,
oh,
so you're just, and that's okay. If I wasn't on a truthful journey, that's all right. But for me, I'm like, no, I am on this journey of truth. And I'm not going to be afraid to say, hey, here's what I'm going through, and be transparent about it. And again, at the end of the day, we live this thing called life, and no one does it perfectly. And, I'm learning. And so I really wanted to include that chapter as a way to be truthful and also to help those that are listening.
Yeah, I love that. And it felt very natural and authentic. And you're right. I think I would have perceived it of like, you're not putting this in on purpose, which means that there's something that you're not comfortable talking about. Now, look, I'm always the person that was like, well, if you're not comfortable talking about it, you shouldn't talk about it. Like,
right.
It's your life, it's your book. You freaking put whatever you want in your book.
Yes.
But I do understand, because there's so many women that do turn to you for relationship advice. You've written so many amazing books. And so in the past about it. And so what do you even said, it just reaffirmed and helped you identify the things that are still important, and the you didn't use this word, but I will, the North Star of love, relationships, and sex. If you don't mind sharing a couple of those, that would be wonderful. Like, what were the things that you were taught growing up, and what have you still believe in, or what ideas have you actually pivoted now, having been in that experience yourself?
Yeah, I've learned so much, and I'm still learning so much about love and relationships. And one of the things that my aunts, and I talk about this in the book, would teach us growing up, is you have to live it to learn it. And that is so true, especially when it comes to marriage. I mean, nobody can tell you what marriage is, until you're in it. And so living it and learning it and understanding it, and not being afraid, right? Because, making a commitment and really seeing that commitment through can be really scary. So I learned, it's okay. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to throw yourself in, and it's okay, that, hey, this is where things ended up. Okay. It's all right to acknowledge that. And I think sometimes when it comes to love and relationships, there's so many ideals that we then impose and enforce on the relationship. And what I'm learning, from what, not even just what my aunts have taught me, but just in my own life, I'm learning okay, again, going back to what we talked to before, in a loving relationship, real love is first me, taking care of me. And when I say taking care of me, I don't mean going off and living a separate life. I'm just saying, what are the things that I need to do to feel valued and validated and loved and appreciated for myself? What are those things I have to do to fill my cup so that then I have something to bring, I have something to offer? And I think a lot of times in relationships when you're single, it's oh, if I could just have a relationship, I would then be fill in the blank. And so as a result, we outsource what we could be doing now to fill our own cup, looking for someone to fill the cup. So then we find that person who fills our cup on the first day. Give it 300, or 2,000, give it day 2,055, right? Okay. And they're like, I'm not filling that cup no more. And you're like, well, what do you mean? This is what love is. And this is, it's like, oh, got it. No, I think a healthy relationship is when both people are doing their work and they're bringing it. And so I have learned, through bumping my head badly, okay, okay, going forward, I need to make sure that I am being the love that I want, and I think that sometimes, growing up, we look at relationships as a way to be serviced. Right? So it's oh no, I want this person to be this or do this. And then that creates an imbalance in the relationship because, when two people may not work out in that way, it maybe has nothing to do with love. Right? Love, I hate to break it to you, love's not enough.
It's not, no.
I hate to break it. I don't mean to burst anyone's bubble.
I know you got. I
know you got a lot of women following you. I'm just saying, love's not.
We want the honesty, though. We want the honesty.
It's not enough. It's not enough. It's not enough to because you can love and it still not work. And I think a lot of times, growing up, we're taught oh man, just fall in love and love will answer all. Well, the love that answers all is the love of self, the love of God. That's the love that can transform. Because when I need someone else to fill the love that we're not giving ourselves, that we're not getting from God, we are going to end up in a very difficult circumstance. Because no one person can fulfill the holes that we have in our soul. It can't happen. It cannot happen. And when we put the pressure on somebody else to do that, we ultimately could destroy what could be very beautiful because we aren't taking accountability for ourselves and the work that we need to do to show up and have that full cup. So when I think about love and I think about relationships, even again, going back to what my aunts taught me, I think about this idea of, I got to make sure I love me. And again, that's not selfish. I'm talking about self-prioritize. I got to love me. There's a scripture that says, of the greatest commandments, love the Lord God with all your heart, mind, and soul. And then there's also the other part of it is love your neighbor as yourself. So growing up in church, a lot of the focus was on loving your neighbor.
Right.
Well, it's why aren't we loving our neighbor well? Because we don't love ourselves. Love your neighbor as yourself. So the more that I learn to love me, the more that I learn to love who I am, the more that I learn to love on myself, the more I actually have to give. There's more love I have to give. And I stop stressing you out, okay? Think about how many relationships are stressed out right now because somebody is expecting that other person to give them something that they're not giving themselves. And then they get mad at that person, right? How dare you not be who I need you to be? If you don't stand in the corner on one leg and hop every day, I'm never gonna be happy, right? It's like, I'm not happy because that person's not doing, really? Is that really the way that this is going to go? So, I'm learning accountability, responsibility, and being the love that I want. So that way I can better appreciate, the love that comes.
But like everything you just broke down of what you're doing for yourself before you then look, even think about a relationship is so beautiful. And so as you were saying, I was like, oh, if you found someone that had that same value system, that same foundation, when you come together, now you're not looking to each other, that you need each other. And this is actually, you mentioned the word need. You said that word like 3 times. And it really stood out to me because it was a whole conversation I had with my husband once. I was telling you about my massive gut issues that I've had in my life before we were rolling. And one of the situations, I was in absolute agony. I'd fallen to my knees because I could barely breathe. I was gasping for air. I had so many gut issues, spasms. And in that moment, I was like, I need my husband. I need my husband. I need my husband. So I'm calling him because he's somewhere in our house. And I'm like, where is he? And he wasn't answering. And I'm on the floor and I'm like, I need him. I need him. But because he wasn't answering, I was like, well, am I going to stay on the floor? And I was like, oh, I don't need him. I want him, but I don't need him. And in that moment, I was like, you are your own damn hero, Lisa. Get up off the damn floor. And that moment was pivotal in my entire relationship. Because since then, I always say to my husband, and he actually felt like it stung him a little at first. And I was like, I don't need you. And he's like, oh, as your husband? Like his identity, going back to how we saw our identity.
Being needed?
Yes, is that he wants to be needed by his wife. So he's 6 foot, I'm 5'1". So there's a whole he wraps his arms around me. He carries me when my feet hurt. I mean,
right.
So that was his identity. And so we had to have a whole honest discussion about the difference between need and want. And the conclusion I came to is, isn't it more beautiful that I'm not with you out of necessity, but I'm with you because I want to, out of desire?
Yes, absolutely.
And once now you can see things like that, you can, going back to your point about building yourself first before you go into these relationships and not looking for someone else to heal you, is to really work through that part of it.
Yes.
And go, okay, what are my needs? How can I show up for myself first? And then let me enter a relationship where now we can want to be together.
Right. And part of the wanting, 'cause I love that differentiation between need and want. Because again, it's like if we talk ourselves into like, oh my God, I need this person. Well, if that person doesn't show up in the way that we need, then what happens, right? So this idea of, no, I want this person, but I'm not dependent on this person, right? And vice versa. Hey, I want you in my life, but I'm not dependent on you. Okay, great. So then we as two adults, can bring that together. In that same book, The Separation of Tasks, one of the things that they talk about, which I thought was so cool, is like when it comes to, a relationship or a marriage, it's not about the me and the you, it's about the us. So it's like, okay, you and your husband run a company. If you don't decide what works best for the company, and then you both agree to that, and then you make sure that gets done, you're both not going to be great partners.
Right.
Because it's like, wait, we agreed the company's going to be this, and you're doing that. It's like, no, now we can hold each other accountable. So in a strong, loving relationship, it's really about, okay, well, what makes us us? What is the us? And let's talk about us. Because so often, going back to the me and you, if we only stay in the me and you, we never really get to the fullness of what us could be. Because then I'm looking at, it's a negotiation.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, you doing this for me, or am I doing this for you? Versus like, think about it. If you had to from a business standpoint, if you had to negotiate with your husband every day about how you're going to do business, you'd never have a successful business.
You'd never get anything done.
Never get anything done. It's like, no, this is what our business is about. This is what we do. So then we can show up every day and execute.
Yeah.
So in a relationship, in a marriage, I don't think there's enough time focused on what is the us? What makes us us? And let's sort that out. And then let's both agree to that. And then it'll help me understand like, oh, okay, yeah, this might work for me, but if it hurts us, I may have to look at it differently. But this works for me and it works for us. Okay, great. There's a win-win. Versus like, well, if it works for me and it doesn't work for us, whatever. Yeah. It's like, well, no, okay, well, if there's some things that I need to do that might hurt the us. Okay, babe, let's sit down. Let's talk about this. Because we said this is what we were about, and I'm committed to that. But here's some me things that I think if I do them, it's going to disrupt the us. Let's sort it out. So that way we have something greater than ourselves that we are focused on, that we're putting in time into and energy into. So it's really about identifying the us. What is the us that we want? right? Okay, I can fulfill my own needs. I'm an adult, okay? I don't need you to fulfill my needs, right? In that way, you know what I mean? But what I want, okay, how do we build the us? What does that look like? And then let's live a life where we commit to that. And we're excited about that.
That is so powerful, and I love that. The analogy I like to use is like a game of tennis. So like normally I see couples where it's like one person's on one side of the net, the other person's on it. So you're playing the same sport, but only one of you can win.
Right, that's right.
And
That's
you're literally just hitting the ball back and forward. You know, whereas I like to think of relationships as being a game of doubles. You both win
That's it.
together.
There you
if
go.
your stroke actually misses, then the other person's got your back. If you're weak at something, your partner can get
There you
strong.
go.
And now you've got that collective goal, that collective like path, and you're going to, that goal that you guys have is together, right? You both want to win together. So when it comes to a relationship, I think that same thing is like, are you aligned so that you both think of winning in a relationship as that like joint North Star that you have?
Absolutely. And I think, you know, I think that if more couples approached it that way, that I think it would help take their relationship to the next level. Because a lot of, you know, again, in a relationship, there's sometimes a lot of negotiation with the me and the you.
Right.
Without a real understanding of what's us. What makes us us? Let's talk about that. Let's dream about that. Let's map that out. Let's write that down. This is what makes us us. Great. Let's both commit to doing the best for us and prioritizing us. And if there's ever a conflict, let's come back to the table and talk about it. But let's make the decision and clarify what it means to be us. And I think that could change a lot of relationships.
God, did you learn communication through the women in your life? Because I know that there's one chapter where you talk about like how all the women in your life were very open about sex and about like the communication. And I was like, wow. Like I kind of almost thought of it as the opposite, because for me, no woman in the Greek Orthodox like ever talks about sex.
Oh, wow.
Ever. I asked my grandmother once and she actually told me it was a stork.
Oh boy,
like,
of
how
course.
old school was that? But yeah, I still got that story.
Oh my goodness.
So to hear that like all the women in your family were so open about sex and communicating about it.
Yeah, they were, I mean, you know, from the time we were young, I mean, they were always talking about sex and giving us lessons. So I have a whole chapter in this book, you know, called "Let's Talk About Sex," and you get it, you know, the listener gets a chance to hear not only my point of view, but also what their wisdom from them directly. And it always created a good, you know, open relationship. Now, I also say that I didn't express to them back my points of view to them. I would just listen. You know, I wasn't like I was open and felt comfortable talking about it. I felt comfortable listening to what they had to say, but I was not offering up much of what I was doing or not doing at the time when they were, you know, giving me that wisdom. But one of the things that I thought was really important that we did learn as young men is, you know, not just the value of pleasuring a woman, but the value of valuing a woman, right? So you, as a man, I can date responsibly and still have a woman's value as my priority. And what that meant for me as I grew up and, you know, got into dating was, well, if I'm not serious, if I don't have any good intent for her, then I'm not gonna lead her down a path that's ultimately not gonna end well because my intent isn't good. Right? And when I say intent, I mean, that doesn't always mean like, oh, I intend to marry you.
Right.
It's like, no, I actually have a good intent to get to know you. I enjoy the time that we spend. I'm going to be honest about that. But if there's no intent there, like, don't put my desire for pleasure over the priority of valuing her. And so if there were women that I, you know, did not value in that way, then it was like, no, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna go down that road. And I think because they were so open with us and communicating about sex and relationships and women so young, as me and my brothers grew up, we, you know, really did have a sense of valuing and prioritizing, you know, women and not just looking at women as, oh, that's just an object of my pleasure. No, that's a person. You know, that's God's daughter, you know, and then again, that doesn't mean that, you know, when I was dating prior to marriage that I was, you know, a successful dater in every situation. I wasn't. Sure. Right. You know, hey, I learned and made some mistakes.
Sadly learned that you're not perfect.
I know, exactly. I tried. But learning to value, you know, a woman. And I think as men, that's something I think that we can continue to do better. We as men are conditioned to seek pleasure, to seek what we want. Doesn't matter who we hurt in the process, as long as we get what we want. We're kind of taught an ends justify the means kind of mentality especially when it comes to dating and relationships. And I think that as men, we have done untold damage unnecessarily to so many women from that, having that mentality. And that's something that, I really am committed to helping change. Just as a man, because you're a man, that does not mean that, it's all right to, be pleased at the expense of someone else's pain. No, I think that we both can have pleasure. We both can find a happy medium where it works for both of us. And if it doesn't work for both of us, it shouldn't work for one of us. Period. Like if I'm engaging with you in a way that doesn't work for you, then it can't work for me.
Yeah.
If this works for us, great, cool. But if it's not, let me not take advantage of the situation or take advantage of you to get what I want, knowing that it's killing you to give it to me.
Oh, that's so strong. What are some of the values then in that you're that the women in your life have taught you? So it was like women are not conquerors. Right? It's not something to conquer.
That's right. That's right.
What other values have you taken into your adulthood, and you're just like, oh my God, this was the most wise things? I mean, because honestly, hearing the words coming out of all these women's mouths was so wise. I'm like, I want to hang with them.
That's right. That's why I did it.
Invite me around for dinner.
Yes.
And so and then hearing about the values that they put on you, it really made me realize how much of behavior is really taught, right? Like when you see, if you're a kid and you're a male and you see people in your life mistreat women and no one's there to help guide you, how you can grow up to mistreat women, and then being able to see someone like yourself, how you've had such a healthy influence on how to treat women, that you now seem like you have a very healthy understanding of how to treat women. So, and you even said, I'd like to help spread that. So what are those things that right now we can maybe say that if a guy is listening, or a woman can actually take on and say, okay, these are the things to feel valued. This is what I should expect from my partner.
Well, in terms of what I learned, growing up, one, it starts with, this looking at a woman as a person. Not as an object of pleasure or desire. Like, of course, if you can be attracted, it wasn't about that. It was just about the value. Like, this is an actual person. And, and then also, even though they talked about, a lot about sex, they also were very clear, don't let sex run your life, right? Like, don't let your desire to find pleasure disrupt your purpose. Because, you can, you can become a man that's all he wants. It's all you want. They would say, but that's not going to end up in a good place for you. So yes, they were very open about, what it meant to have good sex, but they were also very clear that don't let that, run our lives either. Don't be controlled by it, like have a sense of self-discipline as you're dealing with, your other, people, especially women. The other thing, was the value of listening. We were really taught from them, from my mom, my great aunts, about listening. So, in a relationship, yes, it's about being heard, but it's also about listening too. And so really learn the value of not just being so quick to say what I want to say, but to really try to hear, okay, well, what is she saying? What's on her heart? What's going on in her? What's going on in her day, her life? Like really trying to listen. The other part was support, trying to be a good support system. I think we learned a lot about that. Like, it's not just, it's not just about getting what you want. It's about what are you giving to. So these are, I would say those are, and we learn a lot, but those are the four things that really come to mind where, we were taught in terms of how to, navigate dating, relationships, love, and how to really, as men, really make sure the best we can. We are valuing the women that we come in contact with.
Devon, honestly, I could talk to you forever. Your book was beautiful. I am loving this conversation so much. Where can people go and listen to it and then follow you with all the other stuff that you're doing?
Yeah, they can listen to It Takes a Woman on Audible. It's an Audible original. It's an audio only book, and you can just go to Audible. You can access it through audible.com, or if you access Audible through the app or through Amazon, that's where you can find It Takes a Woman. And then for me, I'm on Instagram and social media at Devon Franklin, and then my website, devonfranklin.com.
Amazing. Guys, you've got to go check this book out. I mean, come on. It's called It Takes a Woman. What more do you need to know? Go check it out. It is so beautiful. It's so raw. It is so honest. So go check it out. And guys, if you're not following me, follow me at Lisa Bilyeu. And if you haven't subscribed, click that subscribe button down there. And until next time, be the hero of your own life. Peace.
You can be the total package at the wrong address. So just because you're single does not mean that there is something off within you. If you're not careful over time, you will internalize that messaging